That's the road to your house, where you never call home, where they turned out your lights, though they say you'll never know. I remember running through the wet grass, falling to sit behind. Both of us never timing, desperately wanting. When they pumped out your guts, filled you full of those pills, you were never quite right, deserving all the chill. Said the worst is over. Over again. When they ask what went wrong, when they turn you on again, yeah, they turn you on again. I remember running through the wet grass, falling to sit behind. Both of us never tiring, just really wanting. I remember running through the wet grass, falling to sit behind. Both of us never tiring, just really wanting. Kick 'em right in the face. Make them wish they weren't born. Did they break up your name? Well, say you won the war. Every verse in the world, never giving when they ask what went wrong, when you never had a right, no, you never had it right. I remember running through the wet grass, falling to sit behind. Both of us never tired, just really wanted. I remember running through the wet grass, falling to sit behind. Both of us never tired, just really wanted. Take it to the bridge. Oh, the letters have dropped off, though they say you got them all. Finally figured out some things you'll never know. No. Take back your life. Let me inside, and we'll find the door. If you care to anymore. I remember running through the wet grass, falling to sit behind. Both of us never tiring, just really wanted. I remember running through the wet grass, falling to sit behind. Both of us never tiring, just really wanted.
All right, thanks for waiting through that introduction. That, of course, was Better Than Ezra with Desperately Wanting from 2014 Live. on WMMR, in case you were wondering. So we're going to talk tonight a little bit about some updates. I personally have been very busy. Local issues have been occupying a lot more of my time. I think a lot of you probably are living through um, the first time that you really take an interest in a school board election, and I certainly am dealing with that, but I can't really go into it too much. But I do want to talk about a few issues tonight. The first of which is what I believe is how there is a slow momentum that is building for alt tech that is thanks largely in part to uh, media outlets like CNN that slander people, and also the large scale censorship by social media platforms. And the reason I think it's worth talking about it now is that for many years, and I've been on alt tech since now 2018, specifically BitChute, have been on there since 2018, or I think it was even 2017, because it says it was 4 years. The alt tech revolution is no longer something that is exclusive to people who are defined as right wing. There are many creators who are finding their way to alt tech who are in no shape, way, or form, members of the conservative movement. Right there are certain people who have begun to move over, and I think that while obviously we can't, um, just take solace in people who have bad ideas joining in, it does show that it's not an echo chamber, right? So the person I want to highlight the most is Jimmy Dore. Now I don't have a good display here, but I'll show it to you. Right, so you can see that. Jimmy Dore. Here we go. So this makes it look better. He is now on Rumble. Jimmy Dore is somebody who I've listened to for a while, not necessarily because I agree with him. Now I think he's a good comedian. I think he has great delivery, but his politics have often been terrible in terms of economics and certain aspects of foreign policy. But he isn't one of these frauds. He's not one of these people who says one thing and means another. He's certainly someone who sticks to his principles, whether they're wrong or right. And I think it certainly earned him a lot of respect among people on the right. There are people, for example, like Sean Fitzgerald, who's known as actual justice warrior, who don't give him any credit because they say, well, whatever he may have said that makes a little bit of sense, it's outweighed by his economic illiteracy. It's outweighed by some of his very extreme anti-cop statements, including one where he actually called for cops to be shot back in 2015, I believe, or 2016. But he's still here, and he's still a very prominent voice, and maybe even more so. Like, if you would ask somebody 6 or 7 years ago whether Jimmy Dore's voice really matters in politics, many people would probably ask who. But he's become such a nuisance to people who are within the liberal establishment and within the far left itself, people who are formerly considered progressive rebels, like members of the squad, that they can't help but notice him. So the fact that he's actually gone over to Rumble and said, yeah, I want people to follow me there, it shows that the tech platform is growing roots not only among people who are socially conservative, but also among people who are on the far left. So I consider it to be a positive development, even if it doesn't necessarily elevate the ideas that I stand in support of, which are free markets, freedom of speech, and non-intervention overseas. And I think that if you have people who are from the political left joining in on Rumble, it shows that there is a growing disillusionment across the board with big tech and especially with the mainstream institutions and media that have gotten away with too much for far too long. Another thing I want to talk about, moving topics, is this issue of a bipartisan condemnation of some experiments that were approved by Dr. Fauci in Tunisia. And these are sickening. I think some of you have probably heard this already. It's gone viral that they were putting beagle puppies locked up in basically with their head locked in a cage, so that sandflies could devour them. And it shows really that people say all the time, trust the science, trust the system, trust the professionals, trust the experts. What is it? What happens if the experts are doing things that are plainly unethical? I think that that's something that has to be reckoned with, right? Yeah, you have people who are very intelligent and they have grand ideas of the way the world should work, but that doesn't mean that we have to let them do everything without any accountability. And I think what Fauci did, or what this group of people did, is egregiously against any code of ethics within medical science. Another thing I'm seeing here, not really that big of a story, but I was just looking through this. So apparently, a former aide to Governor Cuomo is saying that Mario Cuomo, his dad, who was also the governor of New York, had called him out. So former Governor Andrew Cuomo and Bill de Blasio aide Karen Hinton is coming out with a book titled Penis Politics, in which he describes how the disgraced governor was admonished by his father, Mario Cuomo, for comparing women's, uh, well, it says T word, but it's the word for breasts. Hinton, the former press secretary to Cuomo and de Blasio, is coming out with the book on December 1st about the toxic brew of ego entitlement and bro culture in politics. Hinton, who worked with the disgraced governor when he was federal housing secretary at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, had publicly accused Cuomo of bullying and inappropriately hugging her when she worked for him 2 decades ago. Um, in her book, she writes, when I was Andrew's press secretary, he told me a story about when he was in college and his father, Mario Cuomo, was New York Secretary of State, detailing what he allegedly said. Andrew and a friend of his were standing next to his father's state car, waiting for Mario to finish up an event. The college-aged Andrew and his friend passed the time by comparing the attributes of breasts of women they knew who had large, boobs, who had small ones, and the pros and cons of how to handle each other, of how to handle each. They were beside themselves with laughter. The window came down. Unknown to them, Mario was in the car already and heard every word. The laughter stopped. Mario was fuming. Don't ever talk that way again about women, whether I hear it or not, Mario lectured Andrew. No wink, wink, nod from Mario Cuomo to his son, Hinton says. Andrew Cuomo told New Yorkers on the day he resigned that the lines on behavior of men toward women had moved as he grew older, but Mario knew where the line was even 40 years earlier. And he tried to teach his son, one future governor to another. So I have a little bit of a mixed um, opinion on this. The fact is that when you're talking among people that are in your friendly circle outside of work, I don't know that that really is a problem. The fact of the matter is, when Trump was president, people were talking about locker room talk. And that's just what it is. There are things that people say, and they are stupid. But there's no real need to police society to the degree where you can't say very ridiculous, outlandish things concerning sexuality. And for those that think that there should be standards like that where you can't say things like that, you could go through literally every movie or comedy act from the 1970s on, and you would probably decimate most of popular culture because, whether it's Andrew Dice Clay, who's easy to cancel, but all the way up to today, you have people like Nikki Glazer and what's her name, Amy Schumer, who are also they happen to be women who have very racy comedy acts, or you go back to Joan Rivers. They have very off-color comedy acts. Where do you draw the line? And then if it's only comedians that can say that, so you're basically saying that the only the comedian has the right to express themselves in a very, uh, you know, coarse and unprofessional manner. I don't think that's the way it is. However, so this is to draw a distinction. When you are in an official capacity, when you are somebody who's like the governor of New York, unfortunately, you can't be the free person that you always were. So you have to change the standard of your behavior, or else you will end up becoming some sort of object of ridicule. People will not respect a public figure who behaves the way that Andrew Cuomo is alleged to have behaved. So, sorry for starting this so late. Obviously, I would have preferred earlier, but we were a little busy today. Um, Another thing I want to touch on. So we did go through the issue of Jimmy Dore joining Rumble, which was, I think, yeah, the 19th, not long ago. Uh, we had the Fauci dog story, which is horrific. And we also have this hilarious story about Andrew Cuomo's dad. Now, let's talk a little bit about the polling for President Biden. I'm not going to go into the Virginia gubernatorial race simply because I don't know really whether to invest too much energy into whether this is going to succeed or not. So, if you live in Virginia, I think you should take it seriously. I usually don't tell people who to vote for, but you could probably draw your own conclusion. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Biden. Now, President Biden, for part of his term, was considered an, basically a popular president. And you saw throughout the summer, there were many polls that showed him with a distinct advantage above water. And slowly that started to slip up until you get to this point over here, which is in August, directly related to the Afghan invasion. His disapproval suddenly cropped up above the approval, and it's only gotten worse. And the reason that I think people are thinking, people are not attributing enough gravity to this. So you have a president who is basically being coddled by most of the media. They've only started to ridicule him at all on Saturday Night Live, which is, it's treatment that you never see for, a president like Donald Trump, who was lampooned constantly when he was president, and every person and his brother tried to outdo the previous one, and put together the most vile and tasteless type of humor. Not that I have a problem with people putting on tasteless humor, but people were just competing as to who would say the most despicable things about Donald Trump, right? And they didn't care about the office of the president. Well, now you have the opposite position, the opposite situation, where you have a president who is being handled with bubble wrap by much of the media and as well as much of entertainment, and his approval is tanking. And you can actually see that his approval is at a new all-time low, which is 42.3. Now, there's different ways to read this graph. One is the difference between approval and disapproval. So it's approaching 10% net disapproval of President Biden, which is terrible for him. It shows that he's rapidly losing momentum. But within that statistic, within that polling statistic, you also have to factor in that the approval itself is at an all-time low. It's at 42.3, whereas previously the lowest point had been 43.2. And the longer that this trend starts to take root, I think that we're going to see real cracks developing in the Biden administration. And what I mean by that is that there are going to be people who will retire and say, this isn't worth it for me. I have other things to do with my time. Um, I don't need to be constantly, dealing with all the stress of actually holding office as an appointee or as some sort of elected official. and you've already seen people start to retire from the House. So that is it for the approval. But you do see that there is the issue of difference in the voters between disapproval and approval, but also the raw approval number itself is beginning to sink. Okay, and you can see that from the individual polls. There are a number of polls already that are showing him to be in the low 40s, and there's 2 polls so far that show him to be in the 30s, which would be disastrous for him. If this is what it says on Selzer, which is one of the polls that came out between until the 17th of October, and it showed him with only 37% approval compared to 50% disapproval. Now, the latest Trafalgar poll has him at negative 19%, meaning 58 to 39%. So it could be that some of these polls are oversampling Democrats, and that's why his numbers are as high as they are. Or it could simply be that the methodologies in these polls are simply too different, and we don't see really, an apples to apples comparison. Because as you can see on the screen, Trafalgar has him at negative 19%, whereas Reuters only has him at negative 2. But finally, after many weeks where at least a couple polls were showing him to be, succeeding, now you have all of them are saying, no, this is actually not good, and he's basically a failure of a president. So there's a lot of reasons that can be attributed to, of course, the Afghan withdrawal being one of them, but also the high gas prices, the general inflation, the economic malaise, the economic stagnation. Um, and there's also a number of liberals that are turning against the woke mob and saying, yeah, we need to actually keep Dave Chappelle and people like him within the mix, because otherwise, um, you know, real comedy can never actually thrive if it's constantly being assaulted by rule makers and moral tyrants. So, I think that's about it for today. Please like, share, and subscribe. I am going to try to do other live streams. It's simply very tiring to do it very like late at night as I'm doing right now. But I do want to start getting back to doing some of these every once in a while, just to check in and let you know my thoughts on the situation as it's happening. Please like, share, and subscribe. Also, subscribe on Gab and Minds for those who want to chat a little bit. Telegram, too, there's a channel, should be in the chat when I add it to the uploaded video. What else? BitChute, Rumble, and Odyssey for video hosting. And yeah, make sure to subscribe to many people from those platforms as well. Anyway, have a great night and enjoy your new week.